Hey there, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a wonderful week. We are almost at Rosh Chodesh Adar Bet, so I thought I'd add a little Rosh Chodesh fun to our short port this week. This week's Parshat Vayakhel, features the mitzvah of Shabbat right at the beginning. Moshe gathers the people and he tells them, Sheishet Yamim Te'aseh Malacha. For 6 days you should do work. On the seventh day of the week, Yelachem Kodesh, it should be a holy day for you. Shabbat Shabbaton LaHashem, it is a day of complete rest to Hashem. Kol ha'oseh bo malacha yumat, anyone who does work, who does creative labor on the day of Shabbat shall be put to death. And the rest of the parsha, after this little section of Shabbat at the beginning, deals with the construction of the Mishkan. We talked about the blueprint of the Mishkan a few weeks ago, and now we have the actual construction of it. Rashi says here, Sheishet Yamim, what is it? The 6 days we should work, 7th day rest. What do we learn from the fact that Shabbat is mentioned here in this tiny little section before Melechet HaMishkan, before the construction of the Mishkan? And Rashi says, Hikdim lahem azharat Shabbat, l'tzivui Melechet HaMishkan, that Shabbat was brought in here before the command to construct the Mishkan. Lomar, to tell us, she'ena dochet HaShabbat, to tell us that the construction of the Mishkan does not push aside the prohibition of doing labor on Shabbat. And you may have thought, well, if there's any exception ever, it's the building of God's home that should be the exception to the rule of Shabbat. Shabbat's all about leaning into how God created the world. God took us out of Egypt, and it's a remembrance for Maseh Bereshit, for creation, and for Vayakhel Yetziat Mitzrayim, for the Exodus. Wouldn't constructing the Mishkan be a perfect way to spend Shabbat? So I'd like to suggest the following, that Shabbat represents Kedushat Hazman, the sanctity in time. And the Mishkan, God's home in the desert, represents Kedushat HaMakom, the sanctity of place. And both are important. It's important to have a space that we come together in Hashem's presence and are able to worship, to do our rituals, and to really connect to God and to our Torah in that way. And it's also important to have designated time that is set aside as sanctified, dedicated time towards God. But what happens when these two come into contact? And we see here, the sanctity of time is perhaps even more important than the sanctity of place. Shabbat supersedes the command to construct the Mishkan. Now, why is this the case? I want to suggest also that because time is something you can never get back. A place, please God, should never think places should never be destroyed, but places are there. They'll hopefully be here today, they'll hopefully be there tomorrow, and the next day and the next day. But time is something that goes away. It's too precious. And if we never set aside time dedicated to God, solely focused on thinking about how God plays such an important role in our life, creating the world, giving us our freedom, then we're missing something. Yes, Kedushat HaMakom is very important too, but we should always appreciate the gift of Kedushat HaZman, the sanctity of time. And that when we take that time, we set it aside and we dedicate specific times, Shabbat, holidays, and other situations that come up to God, our lives are more fulfilling because of it. And that's why when these two come into contact, it's teaching us this lesson of really understanding we must appreciate how God gives us time in life and how we should take our time and make sure that we are doing everything we can to maximize our time, to connect to our Torah, to connect to our people, to connect to God, to connect to our family, because ultimately that is the way that we maximize our potential in life and maximize our impact on this world, is when we don't waste a moment in our lives to connect to our Torah, to God, and to ourselves and to our family. I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.